lovers, and welcome to the 107th episode of Authors Love Bookstores, presented by A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Kimberly Hensle Lowrance. For the past 2 years, I have virtually traveled across the United States, Canada, and Great Britain with my partner, Joe Moldover, to support independent bookstores and the authors who love them. We do this by shining a light on storytelling, creativity, and these small businesses that enrich our community. We're so grateful that you made the decision to be with us today. So excited for today's show. I have been waiting for this, counting down the days, and I'm so excited. Okay, so let me welcome our guest to you. I'm very, very, very excited to welcome the fabulous Deb Rogers to the show today, author of her debut novel, Florida Woman. And I'm also very excited to welcome bookseller Heather Halleck to the show. She's coming to us from Third House Books in Gainesville, Florida. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Okay, let me tell you a little bit about Deb and Heather before we jump into questions. So Deb Rogers is a diversity consultant and freelance writer based in St. Augustine, Florida. Her debut novel, Florida Woman, was published last month by Hanover Square Press. Yay! I have to tell you that I have known Deb for, we were trying to remember before we came live, but 7 years, 8 years, yeah. A long time. We both grew up in the blogging community of the mid 2000s. And so when I heard that she had written a book that was coming out, I jumped at the chance to have her on the show today. And I'm so excited to celebrate Deb and to celebrate this book. And I know we have lots of friends and fans will be in the audience today. So if you have comments or questions, please put them below the broadcast and we'll get to as many as we can later on. So Heather is the owner of Third House Books, which is a bookstore in Gainesville, as I mentioned. It was founded in 2016. The bookstore specializes in titles from small independent presses and marginalized voices, and it is a vital part of Gainesville's literary community. Hooray! Okay, we're here. We're all about Florida today.
Thank you. Yay.
All about Florida. So Deb, when I asked you to be on the show, you immediately said Third House Books. This was the story you wanted to have on as your partner that you wanted to talk about. What is it about Third House Books that's so special? How do you know the store? Tell us a little bit about that connection.
I'm so thrilled to get to share this time with Heather for a couple of reasons, a lot of reasons really. So first of all, I love Florida and I live in rural Florida. I live in St. Augustine, which is rural. And if you know anything about Florida, and people might not, so pull up a map. Well, don't leave a stream, but Florida is vast, vast and rural. And people might think of Miami or Tampa or Orlando, but that's South Florida. Up here, we've got Jacksonville, we've got Tallahassee, we've got Gainesville. That's it for this huge area. And in my life of living in rural Florida, I haven't had a bookstore in my town. Even St. Augustine, which you might have heard of, does not have an indie bookstore. So when you go to a town that does, like Gainesville, getting to go to the bookstore is an amazing treat. And more than a treat, for a marginalized voice of any type, for queer authors, for queer readers, for rural marginalized voices of any kind, it's essential. Like my local library, St. Augustine Library, hasn't bought my book yet. I'm not sure why, but they often don't buy LGBT books right away. They don't buy different marginalized voices for a long time unless there's a lot, it's rural Florida. So our indie bookstores are our lifeblood and there aren't that many of them. Yeah. So what Heather does in a incredible, huge, vast rural area is essential and a treat. And moreover, there's a real important part of rural life, which is we also don't have great medical services. So I have been to Gainesville many times helping really important people in my life survive really difficult things, because that's where there's a teaching hospital. Shands is a famous teaching hospital associated with the university. And that's another resource. So rural people have to go to these areas to get our resources like literature and like medical care, two very important things. So when I would go, like a very important person to me had a serious burn, had to bring them to Shands for cancer treatments, for things. getting to do a few town trip things, we call them town trip, like really get to go to a great bookstore or really get to have a fun lunch or something, makes accessing those things, somewhat livable and somewhat a little treat in a hard day. So for all those reasons, Third House Book has been my heart for a few years now. And then for the third reason, like having this gem make it through the pandemic is essential. And I think the country has just decided that the pandemic is over, but it's truly not. Think about indie bookstores who might not have huge staffs that have been able to kick back into gear. And that is very true. And I really want to bring attention to Third House Books so that people understand the impact, the economic impact, the time, the emotional impact of the pandemic is not over. And many businesses haven't made it or haven't made it or are fighting to survive. And the more we can do to celebrate them or put them on our list for sponsoring in different ways is just so important. So for all those reasons, because they're just this rural gem fighting for their lives in an essential area and just taking such good care of me as a person. And I know for readers all around, I love them. And I'm just so happy to be here with Heather.
What a love letter, Heather.
Oh, Deb, thank you. I've been trying to not cry. It has felt like such a thankless job sometimes when I have not really been able to pay myself a steady paycheck for years. I own a bookstore by accident. It was founded by my friend who stepped out, and I just couldn't bear to see it go either. Because it is bookstores do so much more than sell books. This is also a hub of community, and it is a place where not only have I met some of my best friends, but I get to see people meet some of their best friends. And it's a place where my trans friends feel safe, my Black friends feel safe, and seen. And if there's anything that I could do better, I want to know. Especially because I'm a cishet woman, and I'm white. I'm Latina, but it's I live a different life than my friends from more marginalized groups, and I wanted to see them have a place to go to, especially being Latina in Gainesville. You would think there's a lot of Latinx people, but actually there's not a lot of people who have graduated from the University of Florida and then stayed who are Latinx. I maybe have 3 or 4 Latinx friends here who are, I guess we would call them ACRs, Alachua County residents, or a county. And I've lived here for 10 years, including my time in undergrad. And it's just one of those things where hearing words like that, I'm totally going to go back to this and listen to this when I feel awful, because I really do feel like sometimes, why am I doing this? It's a community service. And for what? After paying bills, it's the 10th now, after paying rent and utility bills in Gainesville, we have a very high utility rate for, we only have one option, the city utilities, GRU. After paying all of those bills, I had $100 left in our account. And, it really sucks to be, I'm 28, asking my parents, hey, can you help me, pay for rent at my house? It's embarrassing. But, and I'm candid about the money thing, and I've started doing that since the beginning of the pandemic, because I'm like, you know what? Why we are all struggling collectively. Why lie about it? Why put on a good face? We're all miserable. And and the other thing is, being a one-person show is hard. People have crazy expectations of you. I've had people ask for a key for when I'm closed. And oh yeah, cuckoo.
That wasn't me. It wasn't me.
No.
I thought about it.
But it's I miss out on moments. Today's my niece's birthday. I don't get to be at all of my family things, and I don't get to be at all my friends' birthday parties. I don't get to take all the vacations that I want because I'm here doing this. And I don't think that people 100% got that. It is a sacrifice that you're making for them. And my bookstore cannot be what everyone else wants it to be. It's about what I want for my community. And obviously, like, my priority is to marginalized voices. Like, I really, if someone comes in here and this is not their vibe, well, you can go to Barnes and Noble,
Yeah. We had a bookstore on the show last week, Thank You Books. They're in Alabama. And their store motto is find a book, find your people. Find your book, find your people.
I love that.
And I loved that. And I think it matches what you're saying about the community that you've created. It's like what all bookstores are, right? You find the voices that touch you on the page, and then hopefully within the walls of the store as well. And I appreciate your candor about how challenging it is, Heather, because we've had so many bookstores on the show over these past 2 years, and they are, big bookstores that have been around for, 60 years. We have not had many bookstores on that are a sole practitioner like you are. Mm-hmm. And that is a different burden, a very specific burden. If you cannot go to work, the store does not open, right? That's a huge challenge.
Yeah, that's why we've lost so many rural bookstores. It's because in a rural area, but they're so essential, because where else do you go to find your people? You know?
Exactly.
Right. And that's also why I've taken the pandemic so seriously, because if I'm sick, I can't even ship your order out. This is done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm immunocompromised too. So it's like, I don't know how done and for how long I will be. And being immunocompromised is very much being marginalized in this country, who has decided that this pandemic is over and now there's going to be another one. And it was, I don't know how to phrase this. I think that the way our government has approached this with a complete lack of mitigation has put a lot of pressure on just regular citizens to take on these risks that are unfathomable. And then, people are entitled, and I understand people want to go out to their bookstores, and I understand that they want things to be normal. Trust me, I want things to be normal again, but that's never going to happen. That moment has passed. And actually, I was just thinking about this because while reading this, I thought so much about Tiger King and like that first month of the pandemic where we all just like sat at home and watched this like drama with Joe Exotic. And the big cats and what's going to happen. And you don't really know, but you're like, these are really messy people. And it was really edible, because one of the things I miss the most about the pandemic is gossip. Like, you don't get to sit outside a coffee shop and hear people's gossip as often, or you don't read at the bar and like hear people's mess.
Right.
And Tiger King felt like, oh wow, like I'm really in this. And reading this book reminded me so much of Tiger King. And then I saw Joe Exotic blurbed it, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. But it's wild how we almost have had eras of this pandemic.
Right.
Throw back to one of the better parts, when we thought maybe this would be over in a month.
Right. Well, but that is part of rural life, is getting to go to the few places, the bookstore, the diner, the pier, that you will get to talk with others and really share those experiences, be with your people.
That is a great transition, Heather. Thank you to talk a little bit about Florida Woman, Deb's terrific debut novel. It was blurbed by Joe Exotic himself. My kind of book. I loved it.
I love that.
I love that. It's hilarious. And then you also have these wonderful blurbs from Jenny Lawson, who we adore. We had Jenny on the show, and we'll put the link to her episode below. She said, I couldn't put it down. And then Kevin Wilson, who I love, he said, razor sharp. And these aren't the only wonderful pieces of feedback about this book. Publishers Weekly called Florida Woman bewitching. I love that so much. And said, Deb, you relish Florida's oddities and extremes, yet you make Jamie, which is the main character, quietly, if quirkily sympathetic, lending the rollicking story a vulnerable heart. Readers will fall in love with this one. The Sun Sentinel said that your debut is a thoughtful, quite serious story about a young woman seeking to belong, friendship, and animal sanctuaries run with good intention. And that this book ushers in a new talent who knows the quirkiness of the Sunshine State. Congratulations.
Oh, nice. That's so nice.
Can you tell our audience a little bit about Florida Woman?
So Florida Woman is an exploration of life on the fringes, and for someone who messes up and wants a second chance and ends up getting her second chance at a rural area where they're trying to figure out how can they use their land and how can they keep their land free from developers. And as part of doing that, they end up creating a monkey refuge, which in their minds, as they're making it up as they go along, turns into sort of a spiritual catch-all for all that they want to do, all they hope will happen in their lives, and the mess they make of that. So she becomes compromised in their coping mechanism and has to figure out whether she should stay or whether she should go.
What I loved so much about this book was how curious I was as I read it.
Yes.
I did not know what was going to happen next. And I say that as a great compliment, because the worst thing is when you read a book and on page 5, you're like, oh, this is who did it. You know, you're like, you know how it's going to end. And I loved that I felt like I was Jamie, that I was confused and uncertain what was happening and trying to figure things out. And I was swept up in her story. And I found that part of the book to be so compelling, to be with Jamie on this journey, Deb. So congratulations, because that was hard to do, to connect with an audience like that. I wonder, what was the spark? I love asking authors this question. Like, what was the spark for you that began the story? Or another way of thinking about it is, what was the question that you wanted to answer with this book?
I think it's a great question. I think I'm really interested in how people cope when they don't know what they're doing. And I find that is the most interesting question in life, is we a lot of times pretend we know what we're doing, but more common is we make it up as we go along, or we listen to someone else. Mm-hmm. And I think that we're all kind of stuck in that place for the last many years of, should we really listen to other people? Should we work on developing our intuition? And if so, we're going to make mistakes along the way. And what do we do about that? So I think those are the things that interest me the most about all characters. Just who do they listen to? How do they create an internal mechanism for evaluating the world, evaluating what happens to them, connecting with others? And then how do we do that in ways that are healthy? Like, how do we connect with others in good ways? Do we wait for others to come towards us? Do we pursue others? So those are sort of the questions, I think, that inform how my different characters cope with the problems of not having an infrastructure, not having support, not have financial support is a big part of rural life. The disparities between who has money, who doesn't, who has land and who doesn't, who has a potential future and who doesn't, really happens a lot in rural areas. And I think in Florida particularly, where land is changing hands quickly, nobody knows exactly what they can count on in the future, and where we sort of have this looming crisis of climate change coming at us in the winds or in our sinkholes. You know, there's a lot of precarity to our lives in rural areas and in Florida. And then there's judgment. There's a lot of judgment. People love to make fun of rural areas. In particular, Florida is the butt of many a joke. Some deserve, some not. And so that interests me too. What does it feel like to be talked about in the ways that a viral character might be talked about? How does that affect our self-image, our perception? I think that's true for Floridians overall. And where do we look to for leadership and support in that?
I think that this idea of the precariousness of Jamie's life is like a really interesting one, because she is a character throughout this book. You're rooting for her, but she almost doesn't. It's not that she doesn't root for herself. It's that she doesn't actually know how to, right? She doesn't know how to listen to her own instincts and there are several times when her gut tells her one thing and she goes against it. And you're like, no, don't do that. But you also understand that she's making those decisions because of history and circumstance and because she doesn't have a safety net. And so there is a sort of desperateness also to the choices that she makes, right? She's
right. And I think that affects a lot of people, whether they want to admit it or not, that we have a real dependence on each other. And if we don't have that infrastructure in place, what does that mean for us? And it's a very lonely experience for many people to not have that or not know who they can trust. And crave it, to crave connection, but not know how to establish it.
A lot of her motivation in the book is this yearning to belong and to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that was something that many readers will inevitably connect with, this idea of like wanting someone to love them, to see them, to hear them. Was that a deliberate choice? When did you sit down and think of Jamie? Was she always that way to you as someone who was craving that? Or was that a sort of a character trait that evolved as the book revealed itself?
That's a good question. I mean, I think definitely, yeah, that is a core question at the book, which is connection. And how does that happen when one doesn't have resources or a history of those connections or healthy connections, or know who to trust or who to look to? And I also was interested in how do we connect with people versus how do we connect with animals, and what is our role in creating healthy relationships with both. So I think her journey is woven in with that.
Oh, we're going to talk about animals. There are many animals in this book. I may have had several nightmares about water moccasins after reading this book, but that is another conversation.
We can't talk about Florida without talking about snakes. So.
Oh, I didn't know what a water moccasin was until I read this book, and I was like, I was in bed reading it, and I said to my husband, "What's a water moccasin?" And then he Googled it and showed me a photo. Yeah, that's not a good idea. Don't do that.
I have a horrifying story.
Do you have a horrifying water moccasin story, Heather? I'm not sure I can handle it.
I don't know if it's about a water moccasin specifically, but I remember being on Facebook one day. There was a customer who used to come in a lot. I have her as a friend on Facebook. And one morning she posted a picture of her toilet, and the caption was, "Can somebody please help me get this snake out of my bathroom?" And here I thought maybe there's a hole in the ground in her bathroom. I mean, Gainesville has a lot of like predatory landlords and people who do not maintain their properties. I was like, maybe there's a hole in the floor. The snake crawled up through her toilet.
That's enough. That's enough. That's enough.
You can never Floridian as snake stories.
That's enough. That's enough. Thank you. I really want to talk about books instead. And it's my fault because I brought up the word moccasin, so I encourage this. But I think that's a great transition to talking about Third House books. So your mission as a store is to focus on small presses and marginalized voices. That's a really interesting focus for a store. I don't think we've had a bookstore on with that, that's very clear mission. And I wonder sort of how do you go about deciding what to put on the shelf? How do you how many books do you have on the shelf at a normal time? What do you do if someone comes in and they really want the next James Patterson, which you clearly wouldn't stock, right? Would you special order it for them? Do you send them away? Like, how do you kind of walk that line of having such a specifically curated selection of books in your community?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with like why I became a reader. As a kid, I had a lot of anxiety, as many people who are book people now as adults did. And I was a library kid. I went to my library a lot, but it was not often that I saw people on the back, like in their author photo, look like my family or me. Everyone was from, I don't know, like blonde, blue-eyed. And I have, my grandparents who don't speak English. So it was one of those things where not because my grandparents didn't speak English, I read a lot of things I maybe shouldn't have read, and I took advantage of some freedoms. But it was a little disheartening not seeing a lot of women, not seeing a lot of Latinas specifically, and especially in Miami, that's where I grew up. And then I went to the University of Florida, got my degree in English, and I had some diverse classes, but most of the time the syllabus was white men, cis white men from 300 years ago, right. 200 years ago. And I had read so much of that I was burnt out and I was tired. I wanted to hear from different people, and I wanted to know that writing could look different. So my friend started the store, and the mission was already there. He's Indian, and we both share some weird like diaspora family stuff where like our parents, my mom is an immigrant, so we had some similar like upbringing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we both wanted to see more of ourselves, but also more of our friends, like our diverse friend group in literature in general. So it was one of those things where it also wasn't that hard to find books that fit. It's not hard to find LGBTQ books. It's not hard to find books by Latinx people, Black people, women. Like if you just simply browse through a catalog or Twitter, you know, people talk about books a lot on Twitter. Book talk. I'm not on TikTok, but I know that's a way that books get around as well. And you know, I couldn't understand a store that would struggle to stock these things because it's just so prevalent and there's so much of it. And there's so much that is good and worth reading. Of course, I will order someone the James Patterson novel if that's what they'd like, but I would encourage them to browse. My store only has like 300, 400 titles. And part of that is like, I have ADHD and I really struggle with like big bookstores and honestly like the sensory overload of even a grocery store sometimes. And I wouldn't want a customer to have to go in with like a list and it's like, oh, I need to find this in fiction and then this in nonfiction. It's like, you know, I would love for them to even just read the back of the book or a blurb and be like, you know, this actually sounds like something I would read, but something I've never heard of, completely out of my comfort zone. And sometimes they find their favorite author, you know? So that's always been the goal. But of course, you know, if there's anything that I don't stock, I'm more than happy to order it for a customer. And my site stocks every book in print in the US for the most part. So
that's great. We'll put the link below to your site. So definitely everyone can get a copy of Florida Woman and you can see the selection of books that you've curated. That's excellent. Thank you for that. Deb, there's a tiger in this book. There's pelican, monkeys. Many monkeys, water moccasins, as we have discussed, and alligators, gators, and of course humans. There are a lot of animals in this. Oh, there are some like insects and whatnot.
My poor copy editor had to look up so many things.
You told me once of a palmetto bug, and I was like, no.
Oh, don't give me more things to Google and be scared about.
It's a flying roach.
Nice.
No.
I held back, didn't I, Heather? I held back on
you held back.
Is like.
I have a phobia. Like I see a palmetto bug and I don't sleep in my room if it's in my room. I will sleep at someone else. I've debated getting a hotel if there is a palmetto bug in my house.
Poor Kimberly, like scared.
I lived in Florida for one summer and I do not remember all of these animals, but maybe I blocked it out.
It depends on where you were though.
Okay, true. Good point. I was in Orlando for summer, but
they have palmetto bugs.
Okay, well, we're gonna pretend that you didn't say that. So Deb, have you always been a lifelong animal lover?
I have. I had a pony when I was young, but a rural pony, not like a princess pony, like a rural pony. And so I have always had a relationship and an appreciation for how animals, just like books, can be a friend to those of us who might not be as socially slick as others. So I do have a long appreciation. And I did live rurally in Florida. I lived, in the woods, in a setting very much like the one that inspired the book. I lived without air conditioning for several years in rural Florida. Lord. So I lived in buildings that really weren't equipped to hold the outside out. So I think all of the snake stories that made it to the final draft were from my own life. I've lifted washing machines and had snakes in them.
Kimberly's face.
I've had, so to me, the rural life does have a really cool. We just had a turtle in our front yard, and walking out this morning. A real cool appreciation for how we share the landscape with the vines that want to come back in, the animals who want to live with us, and those that we choose to have. And so I do think there's sometimes, and Tiger King's a good example of that. And there's both class issues with animals and there's rural city issues with animals that I think sometimes those boundaries and barriers of what makes a pet and a family member and livestock are really interesting to explore. where are we all okay, and where do we see signs in the animals that cross our path and where we don't, and what is our relationship with not just animals, but the weather, the moon, all of the things that are part of the outside in class is a really important issue when you're talking about everything we've talked about so far, really. Everything from what kind of stores are welcoming to all classes. Stores like Heather's is, but not all stores feel like a place where everyone can be welcome and go to. But animals are always accepting. So
the monkeys that you featured in this book, macaques,
mm-hmm.
is that how you say it?
Mm-hmm.
So they're very clever. And in some ways I did a little Googling about them too. And there's some crazy stories about times when they have attacked humans.
Mm-hmm.
Japan, there's some stories about
recently, some
stealing
baby napping
and pushing people off balconies. And they are, there seems like almost a way of expressing their frustration with the choices we have made as humans, right? It's encroaching upon their land. And that's such an interesting twist for this book, where these people are trying to control the monkeys, and their hearts are to give them a better life, but they're also forcing them into a sort of expectation that perhaps doesn't align with their true nature, and creates a good drama for the book, obviously. How much research did you need to do? Because it seems like, as reading this book, did you spend time with these monkeys? Because you see that I felt very confident that you knew everything about them when I read this book. So
Me too. I felt the same.
Right?
Well, I'm not a biologist.
Wow. No,
it's fiction. I'm not a biologist, but of course, visiting and being a part of both refuge work and animal work and a little bit animal trade work is essential to understanding the different issues, and the conflict. There is a huge conflict with what is the ethical way to have pets, and why is it different if it's a German Shepherd or a monkey, or is it different? Is it the trade aspect? Is it the wild aspect? And how are monkeys alike? We always project humanity onto monkeys because they're primates and or related to our facial structure alone. Mm-hmm. Florida has this huge problem with wild monkeys who shouldn't be wild. We also have growing pythons, and we can handle those problems differently because nobody is sad when you round up and exterminate pythons. But everyone, of course, has different feelings if you round up and even sterilize monkeys. So, all that stuff I think we all have to grapple with. And it is so symbolic of how we grapple with control, our own humanity, our own wildness. And so, yeah, that's fun to play with.
The other thing you did very well in the book is establishing the sense of place. The reviews said this as well, as how much Florida comes alive, bugs and snakes notwithstanding, just the syrupy air and the sort of ominousness of, I think I just made up a new word, the way, at night, it's not safe for Jamie to come out of her little cabin because you don't know what she could encounter. The sort of the heat and the way it sort of becomes a hindrance at times. I thought you did an extraordinary job creating the setting of this place and making it real and accessible to the readers. And I wonder, what advice might you offer to another writer? We have a lot of writers watching the show. What do you think is essential in creating that sense of space and place, and establishing a reader? Are there specific things you did that made it easier for you, that you'd say, oh, this is a must do for someone else?
Well, I'm a big believer in going to where you want to write about. So I've definitely revisited the places that I've been to, or, have to invoke the things that you might forget about. I'm also a big believer in structure. I had a map that told me where the moon, it's a limited time frame in the narrative. So I knew exactly where the moon would be in the sky at different times. That might not be in the story, but it made it for me real.
I love that.
That kind of thing. I also come, luckily, from a rich heritage of great Florida writers who've written, whether it's Marjorie Ken Rawlings, in the past, or current writers like Steph Post or Kristen Arnett, who do a great job of getting into the stickiness of Florida, or the realities of Florida life that bring that story alive. So I think reading too is a big part of what we can do to make sure we're we're understanding where stories have come from and how they relate.
Excellent. I want to talk about Florida writers, but you made me think of another question. One of the other things I loved about this book, this is all the things I love. There are many things. I love the structure of this book. I thought it was so inventive. So for people who haven't yet read the book, we alternate between Jamie, her first person POV, and then essentially, I guess it's a Word document that 3 other characters are editing together with their track changes. Deb, this is so smart. I loved it because it allowed us as the readers to see the POVs of these other characters, but it didn't take it at all away from Jamie's story, right? We still knew we were always with Jamie. Our heart was always there, but we had these little glimpses into these other things that were happening to them, these characters she was interacting with. And then they're sort of the tension and the emotions of those characters changed, and they became slightly more unhinged, or, you know, their true intentions were revealed. So such a smart device. When did that come to you to do that alternating POV?
Thank you. Yeah, we had a lot of fun with that. That, I think, the second or third draft, I wanted to create suspense. I wanted to know a little, and I wanted to give a little grounding so that people weren't only questioning Jamie's reality or experiences. Also, I just in looking at groupthink and how people make their decisions, I really did want to show how these, I mean, we've all been in group projects before that have gone awry because, you know, we're all, and I wanted
alone for a reason.
Right. So I wanted to show, and I really was interested in, one of the characters really sort of envisions herself as a leader and is frustrated that nobody's coming in to help her be all that she thinks she can be. And there might be good reasons or not good reasons that she also doesn't have the support that she wishes for in life, or that would help her rise to this level. So I wanted to be able to show that, but still have that close first person for most of Jamie's journey. So thank you. That I had a lot of fun with that.
Gossip goes down in the Google Drive comments or Google Doc. I mean, that's where it's at.
Right. That's where reality is really happening for a lot of us as we learn how to work together and work remote. That real stuff goes down. And I love language when people are not being honest with what has happening on the surface, and there's a couple of layers of either frustration or betrayal or groupthink, or when you can tell the relationship between 2 people commenting about the third person's work, all that. I like that.
Well, I thought it was really cool too. I mean, I don't know if you would describe Atlas as like a cult, but to me, I don't know, I'm a Scorpio. I'm like, this is a cult. And I mean, I love cult documentaries, podcasts. But in a cult, the most important thing is like the dogma that the other members inherit from the leader. So I think that the Google comments or Word comments do a really good job of illustrating like how these ideals are like passed down, and then how the other characters are supposed to like digest it and accept it as truth unquestioningly, you know?
And I really wanted to show that they were making it up as they went along.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's true for writing too. In some ways it's parallel to writing. Like so many times the things in our heads, when we really try to get them down, they're not as fully formed as it felt in our heads. I wanted to sort of capture that feeling, and also to show what it looks like to reinforce other people's reality.
I also think with like rural areas, there's something that comes with setting, and that's lore. Like we all know about like the monkeys in Homosassa, right? Like, and they escaped because of a movie set. I can't remember which movie, but I'm sure you know. But it's one of those things that you kind of like, similar to the cult thing, you know, people kind of indoctrinate you with these stories. Like I'm from Miami, so I know a lot of Miami stories, but then I moved to Gainesville and you hear about like the haunted buildings on campus or things like the monkeys in Ocala. And then you tell other people, like I'm telling everyone who's watching this, and people research it, and then they're like, oh, wait, this is actually true. Right. And you can actually see these monkeys, and there are glass bottom boats, and there are gators everywhere. I mean, in Gainesville, we have them on campus, you know, and very real. I don't know if but this is another thing, walking in a zigzag. I don't know if that's just lore or if it's true.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to run away from an alligator, you run in a zigzag. Apparently it disorients them. I don't know.
A lot of lore goes to that survival, and also class survival. You know, and some of it is also class specialness. A lot of people meet in lower class or marginalized classes or marginalized voices really try to enhance and create that lore, either to preserve what is real and good and special, or to add some sense of specialness, so there's a reason to preserve it. So if you're under a request from developers all the time to take your land, you want to say it's special, you know. So I wanted to show the characters. Really, 1 out of 4 people you meet in Florida will try to tell you they know where the fountain of youth really is, and it's not where you think it is. So, you know, of course, if you wanted to feel special and you want to feel like your land was special, you might add that lore to your history of the land and try to institutionalize it.
Yeah, Kimberly was saying earlier that she really related to Jamie, and for me, I am, perhaps because of my own experiences, very suspicious of other people. And I immediately caught on that there was something going on, and I was like, this sounds a little woo-woo, and I don't trust woo-woo people. Also, this is the middle of nowhere, and I've been to the Ocala National Forest, so it's also a very real image for me. But, geez, I forgot where I was going with this. Setting plays such a, like, main character role in the book. Like, setting is an actual character, and it's like the landscape knows, and it's like omniscient. Like, it knows what's going to happen. It knows that something's up. Obviously can't tell Jamie, but there's, I don't know, maybe a personification of setting there that it does take an active role in the book, and it's not just like this passive place where everything happens.
Yeah, that's totally true. I think you're right. I think that Deb's setting in this book, it's not a tourist right up for Florida. It definitely, but it lends to what's going on in Jamie's life. It echoes some of the what she should be paying attention to, right?
Yeah. And with true affection from me for what is Florida facing in the coming years. Yeah. You know, what do we stand to lose? And if Florida is a character, then that feels urgent to me. And in some ways urgent to the characters who don't know what to do with those feelings.
We have an audience question, which is also a question I wanted to ask, which is, tell us about, we want everyone to read Florida Women. We're putting the links below the broadcast to buy Deb's book from Third House Books. Who else should we read? If we or in this case, like this person, I've already read Florida Women. I loved it. I want more. What do you two recommend?
I have 2 recommendations. And Deb, if I cover yours, you can, I don't know, get mad at me. First, I would say Kristen Arnett's Mostly Dead Things. I love creepy taxidermy stuff, and you could ask any friend who's been to my house. I am the person who has skulls in like the macerating liquid in my kitchen. I have a gator head in my house. So I really liked the weird, quirky, like the Florida creatures, and how she talks about roadkill, and that's like a very like North Central Florida thing. And it's in Orlando, so it kind of takes like a kind of Florida Project, the movie aesthetic, but it's not the tourism part. It's like, these are the locals and this is how they live, and their business is harvesting roadkill and making taxidermy out of it, and this is their livelihood. And it's very real about poverty and queerness and loss. I really love that book. I think it's very quirky and fun, while also sad. And then also Florida by Lauren Groff. It's a collection of short stories. Lauren Groff is local here to Gainesville. Lauren is also the author of Fates and Furies. That's like her probably best known book. But Florida really describes the various landscapes that Florida has. It's not just North Central Florida. It's not just South Florida. And I mean, it is a very dark, not necessarily romanticized view of the state, and I really appreciate that. It's real.
Great. Thank you for those recommendations. Deb, can you?
Perfect. And I went to Kristen Arnett's event at your store.
I love that.
It was so big it had to be held somewhere else, right?
Yes, at the Civic Media Center. I actually have her coming in
Great
October,
event.
also at the Civic Media Center.
Great event. That was so.
You heard it here
that's the other important way that this important store is important in a rural area, because there just aren't all those opportunities all the time. I would also add Lindsay Hunter. She's an amazing. She sometimes isn't recognized as a Florida writer, but she is. Even though she doesn't live here now, she lives, I believe, Chicago. But Ugly Girls is amazing and really captures sort of those class and character issues. I'd add Steph Post, who writes beautifully about rural Florida. Just so many. So those are
excellent.
Sherry Priest. Has written about Cassadaga. Brimstone, I think it's called.
Yeah.
So good. I recommend that all the time.
Great.
There's a lot of great.
No one would guess there's a town entirely made of psychics in Florida, but we have one.
Because we were the winter home for Northern Carnival folks.
Yep.
Psychics, all kinds of stuff makes Florida weird.
Okay, so we're going to put links to all those things below, the books that you mentioned. Also, I'm going to think more about a town full of psychics. A little bit more about that. But I wanted to just, Heather, you mentioned that you're going to have an event with Kristen Arnett in October. So we're gonna just remind people to check out your website. The link is in the broadcast below.
I haven't formally announced it yet, but
okay,
it will be up soon.
Okay, great. So, but definitely to bookmark your website, hop on your social media handles so you can get a sense of get notified when that happens for people in the area. And we've also put some upcoming events for Deb below in the broadcast, and
Thank you.
A podcast you were on with some old blogging friends, so people I've been listening to this week, so people can get more about Deb and about this terrific book. We're running out of time, which I have like way more questions, so I'm so frustrated about that.
We just have to bring you down here, Kimberly. You need to come on down.
You guys are never getting me down to
We'll
Florida.
keep you safe.
No,
we keep you safe.
You lost me
normal.
You lost me at pythons in the pipes and water moccasins.
We'll go to St. Augustine. There are no pythons. There is simply the beach.
Just the beach.
And Deb.
And turtles.
And Deb is
and pelicans.
And
pelicans. Yeah, and fish.
But Deb, what I wanted to ask you, don't forget the palmetto. Yeah, so today our producer is Mark Cecil, the thoughtful bro. He's filling in for us, and he has a great sense of humor. Okay, thank you, Mark. Deb, I wanted to just ask you a last question about Florida Women. I just really hope everyone picks it up. I think it's a wonderful book, and I'm really excited for you that this wonderful creation is out in the world. What is it that you hope that your readers take from your book when they get to the last page? What is it that you would love for them to be thinking about? Or not water moccasins, obviously. I'm joking when I talk about all the animals and other creatures. But
so in Florida, we'd also call them critters.
I said critters.
And Deb is laughing because I'm right.
She's right. You ain't wrong. Ain't wrong about that.
But what is the sense? What is it that you want your readers to take away from Florida Women?
I hope readers feel like they always have a second chance, and they're a little less alone in the world, whether that's with the people that they make connections with, or with the animals they make connections with, or with their own intuition, that somehow the journey of the book helps them know that they're not alone and they can always have another chance to get it right.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Will there be another book in your future?
I hope I get to keep writing. This has been an amazing experience. I can't imagine not wanting to continue writing. I know I'm incredibly fortunate. I had an amazing publishing process with Hanover Square Press, which has just been terrific to me and amazing, and a huge collaborative, exciting experience. So I've had a really fortunate time, and I hope I get to do it again.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to that. Heather, last question always goes to the bookseller. Please finish this sentence for us. Okay. Running a successful bookstore is part hard work, part luck, and part what else? Heart. I love that. Thank you.
Perfect.
We've gotten all the variety of answers over the past 2 years from booksellers.
Has anyone else said that?
We've heard things like love, passion, family, money, pizza.
Money.
Pizza is my favorite.
I don't have a lot of that.
But yeah, I think everyone, heart is very critical to writing and to
have thick skin
bookselling.
sometimes. It's not just love.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you both for being with us
Oh,
today.
thank you. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To our audience, thanks for tuning in. Please go buy Florida Woman from Third House Books. And if you liked today's show, which we hope that you did, please subscribe to A Mighty Blazes page on Facebook so you can get notified about all of our events. Or if you're not a Facebook person, don't worry. We're on YouTube and Twitter too. So hop over to amightyblaze.com to sign up for a newsletter, which goes out every week and gives you the rundown of all of our shows. We'll be back
on Twitter. Deb and I are very messy.
Yes, we're on Twitter. We put
Join the mess.
Tarot.
Lean in.
Below. We'll be back here next week for the 108th episode of Authors Love Bookstores next Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We hope that you join us then. Until then, be well and keep reading.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.